They said she was worthless. They said an Omega could never stand in the Hall of Alphas. They laughed when she scrubbed their floors, when she served their wine, when she bowed her head as they passed. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the girl with downcast eyes and calloused hands was counting every insult, every humiliation, every moment they underestimated her. And in just 7 days, she would turn their fortress of power into her personal throne room. This is the story of how the weakest wolf in the kingdom became its most dangerous queen. This is the story of Aino's revenge. The morning sun barely penetrated the thick stone walls of King Vano's castle, leaving the lower corridors where the Omegas worked in perpetual twilight. Aino's knees ached from hours of scrubbing the great hall's marble floors, her fingers raw from the harsh lye soap they forced the servants to use. 23 years old, and she had spent 18 of them within these walls, ever since her parents died in the border wars and the pack reluctantly took her in. Not that they ever let her forget it was reluctant. "Move faster, Omega trash." Ilmari, the beta captain of the guard, kicked over her bucket of water as he passed. The dirty water spread across the floor she'd just cleaned, seeping into the cracks between stones. "The Alpha King arrives tonight, and if these floors aren't spotless, you'll be cleaning them with your tongue." Aino kept her eyes down, her wolf silent inside her as it had been trained to be since childhood. "Yes, Beta Ilmari." She waited until his footsteps faded before allowing herself the smallest smile. Let them think her broken. Let them believe the years had crushed whatever spirit she'd once possessed. They had no idea that every night, while they slept off their wine and debauchery, she had been studying, reading the books they left lying around, learning the ancient laws they assumed no Omega would ever understand, memorizing the pack's secrets whispered in corridors they thought were empty. Knowledge was power, and Aino had spent 18 years becoming very, very powerful. The Alpha King was returning from the Northern Territories tonight, and with him came opportunity. King Vano the Ruthless, they called him. The unmated Alpha who had unified the wolf clans through blood and brutality. At 35, he had ruled for 10 years, and in that time he had taken no queen, acknowledged no mate, shown mercy to no one. He was also, according to pack law, required to consider any formal challenge to his authority presented during the Blood Moon Festival. And tonight marked the beginning of that 7-day sacred period. Aino refilled her bucket and continued scrubbing, her mind working through the plan she'd crafted over countless sleepless nights. 7 days. That's all she needed. 7 days to dismantle everything they'd built, to expose every corruption, to claim what should have been hers from the beginning. By the time the blood moon waned, she would either sit on a throne or be buried beneath it. There was no middle ground. The castle came alive with frantic preparation as evening approached. The head housekeeper, a bitter woman named Helka, screamed orders at the Omega servants, demanding perfection for the king's arrival feast. Aino moved through the chaos like a ghost, invisible to those who mattered, present enough to avoid punishment. "You," Helka grabbed Aino's arm with clawed fingers, "you'll serve the high table tonight. And if you spill a single drop of wine on anyone important, I'll have you whipped." Perfect. Aino had hoped for this assignment, had in fact orchestrated it through careful manipulation of the serving schedule. At the high table, she would be close to the king, close enough to observe, close enough to plant the first seeds of her revenge. "Yes, Mistress Helka. I understand. And fix your appearance. You look like a drowned rat. The king has standards, even for the servants." Aino retreated to the Omega quarters, a cramped room in the castle's basement that 20 servants shared. She changed into the formal serving dress, still plain and gray, but at least clean, and for the first time in years she looked at herself properly in the cracked mirror hanging by the door. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under amber eyes, hair the color of summer wheat, dull from years of neglect. She looked like what they'd made her, a nothing. No one. But they would never see her coming. The great hall blazed with torchlight by the time the king arrived. Aino stood against the wall with the other servants, head bowed, as the massive doors flew open and King Vano strode in with his personal guard. Even Aino, who prided herself on her emotional control, felt her breath catch. The Alpha King stood at least 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered and powerful in a way that spoke of both his wolf and his warrior training. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, partially tied back to reveal a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so cold. Scars marked his neck and jaw, evidence of battles won. His eyes, pale blue like winter ice, swept the room with a practiced assessment of a predator. Power radiated from him in waves so intense that several of the younger Omegas whimpered and dropped to their knees. Aino remained standing, though she kept her gaze lowered. She had learned long ago to shield herself from an Alpha's aura, a trick she'd discovered in one of the forbidden texts in the castle's library. "My king," Beta Toivo, the king's closest advisor, approached with arms spread in welcome. "Your chambers are prepared. The feast awaits your pleasure." Veno's voice, when he spoke, was deeper than Aino expected, rough as gravel. "Any news from the western border?" "All quiet, my lord. The rebels have retreated after your demonstration." The king's lips curved in something too sharp to be called a smile. "Good. Let them remember what happens to those who challenge my authority." They settled at the high table, the king in the center, surrounded by his betas, advisors, and the highest-ranking members of the pack. Aino moved forward with the other servers, carrying a heavy pitcher of wine. Her heart pounded, but her hands remained steady. This was it. The beginning. She approached the king's left side, where pack law dictated she was permitted to serve. As she poured his wine, she allowed her scent, carefully masked with herbs until this moment, to drift toward him. Not the weak, suppressed scent of a broken Omega, but something else. Something she had been hiding for years. The king's hand shot out, gripping her wrist before she could step away. His touch burned like fire, and for the first time in her life, Aino's wolf stirred, truly stirred from its forced slumber. "You!" His voice had dropped to a growl that sent shivers through every wolf in the hall. "What is your name?" Aino finally raised her eyes to meet his, and she let him see, just for a heartbeat, that she was not as broken as she pretended. "Aino, my king. I am no one of consequence." His eyes narrowed, and she could see his wolf rising to the surface, responding to something in her that even he didn't understand. "Your scent is that of an Omega, my king. Nothing more." She gently pulled her wrist from his grasp, lowering her eyes again. "Shall I continue serving?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then he released her and waved her away. But Aino felt his gaze following her for the rest of the night, heavy and considering. The first seed was planted. The Alpha King was intrigued. Aino slept little that night, her mind racing through the next steps of her plan. She rose before dawn and made her way to the part of the castle she wasn't supposed to access, the royal library. The old librarian, Ukko, had befriended her years ago when he caught her stealing books. Instead of reporting her, he'd recognized her hunger for knowledge and secretly taught her to read the old languages. He had died 3 winters past, but he'd given her a key to the library's restricted section before he passed. She unlocked the heavy door and slipped inside, moving quickly to the ancient text section. Her fingers traced the spines until she found what she sought, the original pack laws written by the first Alpha Kings, before corruption had twisted the rules to serve only the powerful. Article 17, Section 4. Any wolf, regardless of rank, may petition the Alpha King for justice during the Blood Moon Festival. Such petitions must be heard in the presence of the full pack and decided before the moon's cycle ends. And more importantly, the subsection that everyone had forgotten. Should the petitioner prove their case against corruption within the pack, they may claim the seat of any wolf found guilty, up to and including the Beta Council. This was her path. Not a direct challenge to the king's authority. She wasn't fool enough to think she could win a physical contest against him. But a challenge to the corruption around him, the betas and advisors who had been stealing from the pack, abusing their power, and breaking pack laws for years. If she could prove their guilt, she could legally claim their positions. And with control of the Beta Council, she would effectively control the kingdom. The library door creaked open. Aino's heart leaped into her throat as she quickly tucked the book under her dress. But it was only Karina, another Omega servant and the closest thing Aino had to a friend. "Are you insane?" Karina hissed, her round face pale with fear. "If they catch you in here." "They won't." Aino moved past her toward the door. "What are you doing awake?" "Looking for you. Helka is asking questions about why you're not in your bed. Tell her I was cleaning the king's private chambers." It was a believable lie. That was exactly the kind of degrading task they'd assigned to an Omega. Karina grabbed her arm. "Aino, what are you planning? I saw how the king looked at you last night. Everyone is talking about it. Some of the betas are angry. They're saying you used Omega tricks to seduce him. Let them talk." Aino squeezed her friend's hand. "Trust me, Karina. In 7 days, everything will be different." "That's what I'm afraid of." But Karina released her. "Just be careful. I can't lose you too." Aino thought of all the friends she'd lost over the years. Omegas who had been worked to death or broken by abuse, or who had simply given up and let their wolves fade away until they died. The cemetery beyond the castle walls was full of unmarked graves, uncounted and unmourned. "You won't lose me," she promised. "I'm going to win." The day passed in a blur of menial tasks, but Aino's mind was elsewhere, refining her strategy. She needed evidence of the Beta's corruption, concrete proof that even the king couldn't ignore. And she knew exactly where to find it. Beta Toivo, the king's chief advisor, kept personal records in his study. He was paranoid about betrayal, so he documented every bribe he took, every law he bent, every secret deal he made. Insurance, he thought, against his fellow betas turning on him. That paranoia would be his downfall. Breaking into Toivo's study would require careful timing and more than a little courage. The beta was rarely away from his chambers, paranoid as he was. But Aino had noticed his pattern. Every evening, he visited his mistress in the East Tower. He would be gone for at least 2 hours. That would have to be enough. As the sun set on the second day of the Blood Moon Festival, Aino waited in the shadows near Toivo's chambers. She'd stolen a set of lockpicks from the castle smith years ago, teaching herself the skill through trial and error on old trunks in the storage rooms. Finally, Toivo emerged, dressed in fine clothes and reeking of expensive cologne. He headed toward the East Tower with the smug confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Aino counted to 100, then moved. The lock yielded to her picks after only a few moments. She'd practiced on this very door during previous nights. Inside, the study was exactly as she'd observed through the keyhole. Neat. Organized. And there, on the heavy oak desk, a locked chest made of iron. She knelt before it, her hands working quickly. This lock was more complex, designed to thwart thieves. But Aino was patient, and she'd become very good at this particular skill. Blick. The chest opened. Inside, stacks of documents bound with red string. She pulled them out, her eyes scanning the contents by candlelight. Perfect. Even better than she'd hoped. Records of bribes from merchants seeking favor. Lists of Omegas sold to neighboring packs in violation of protection laws. Evidence of stolen tax revenue that should have gone to feeding the pack's poor. And most damning, a letter discussing plans to assassinate the king's younger brother, Ati, who served as a general in the Northern Territories. Toivo wasn't just corrupt. He was plotting treason. Aino carefully copied the most damning passages onto parchment she'd brought with her. Her hand cramping as she wrote in the abbreviated script she'd developed for speed. She couldn't take the originals. Toivo would notice immediately, but copies would be enough to force an investigation. She was so focused on her work that she almost didn't hear the footsteps in the corridor. Almost. Aino's blood turned to ice. Those were boots, heavy and military. Not Toivo's soft leather shoes. The beta had returned early, or worse, someone else was coming. She shoved the documents back into the chest, locked it, and looked desperately for a hiding place. The window. No, too high, and she'd be seen from the courtyard. Under the desk. Too obvious. The wardrobe. It was her only option. Aino squeezed into the tall wooden wardrobe just as the door opened. Through the crack between the doors, she could see who entered. King Vaino. The Alpha King stood in the doorway of his advisor's study, his expression unreadable. He moved through the room with predatory grace, studying everything, searching for something. Aino barely dared to breathe. If he found her here, no explanation would save her. She would be executed for espionage before dawn. The king approached the desk, his hand resting on the iron chest. For a terrifying moment, Aino thought he would open it, would discover that someone had just been inside. But instead he turned, his nostrils flaring. He was scenting the air. "I know you're here." His voice was conversational, almost amused. "I can smell you, little Omega." The same intriguing scent from last night. "What are you doing in Beta Toivo's study?" Aino's mind raced. Deny everything. Claim she was cleaning. She pushed open the wardrobe door and stepped out, her chin raised despite her terror. If she was going to die, she would do it with dignity. "Seeking justice, my king." His eyebrows rose slightly. Justice. An interesting word for what looks very much like breaking and entering. Article 17 of the original pack laws grants any wolf the right to petition for justice during the Blood Moon Festival. She met his ice-blue eyes directly, her wolf finally rising fully within her, unafraid. "I am exercising that right. By sneaking through my advisor's private chambers. By gathering evidence of his crimes against the pack. Against you." Now she had his full attention. The king moved closer, and Aino forced herself not to retreat. He towered over her, his power pressing down like a physical weight. But she stood firm. "Explain." Quickly. Aino pulled the folded parchment from her bodice, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Beta Toivo has been stealing from the pack treasury. He's taken bribes to subvert your justice. He's sold omegas to other packs in violation of protection laws. And most damning, he's plotting to have your brother assassinated." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The king's wolf was so close to the surface now that his eyes flickered between blue and gold. "These are serious accusations. You have proof. In that chest. Toivo keeps records of everything, insurance against betrayal. But it's made him vulnerable." She held out her copied notes. "I've documented the locations of the most damning evidence." Vaino took the parchment, scanning it quickly. His expression remained neutral, but she could feel the rage building in him, hot and dangerous. "Why should I trust you? You're an Omega who's admitted to stealing, trespassing, and espionage. Because I'm the only one in this castle who isn't profiting from the corruption. Because I have nothing to gain by lying to you. And because," she took a breath, committing fully to her path, "under the ancient laws, I'm formally petitioning for justice. You are bound by sacred oath to investigate my claims." For a long moment, the king simply stared at her. Then unexpectedly he laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You're either the bravest Omega I've ever met or the most foolish. Possibly both." He moved to the chest, producing a key from his pocket. Of course he had access to his advisor's records, and opened it. He pulled out the documents, reading through them with increasing darkness in his expression. Aino waited, her fate balanced on a knife's edge. Finally Vaino looked up. "You will come with me. Now." "Where are we going?" "To my private chambers. And you will tell me everything you know about the corruption in my pack, starting with who else is involved." He fixed her with a gaze that could freeze fire. "And then, little Omega, we'll see if you survive what comes next." The king's private chambers were nothing like Aino had imagined. She'd expected opulence, extravagance, the trappings of power. Instead, the rooms were almost Spartan. A large bed with simple but quality linens, a desk covered with maps and military reports, weapons hanging on the walls and books. Everywhere books. King Vano poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. Aino took it surprised. Alphas didn't share wine with omegas. It implied an equality that went against every pack hierarchy. "Drink," he commanded. "You look like you're about to faint." She sipped the wine. It was far better than anything she'd ever tasted, rich and smooth. "You're not going to execute me." "Not yet. I find myself curious." He settled into a chair, gesturing for her to sit as well. "Another breach of protocol. How does an Omega servant become literate in the old laws? How do you know about codes and ciphers? And why risk everything to bring me this information?" Aino sat carefully on the edge of the chair, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. But she'd come too far to retreat now. "The old librarian, Ukko, taught me to read when I was a child. He said it was a waste that Omegas were forbidden education. He gave me access to the restricted texts before he died." She met the king's eyes. "As for why I'm risking everything, I'm not risking anything. I'm an Omega. I already have nothing. I've watched my friends die from neglect and abuse. I've seen Omegas sold like cattle, starved, beaten, worked to death. All while your betas grew rich and fat on stolen wealth. You blame me. It wasn't a question. I blame the system. But you're the Alpha King. You have the power to change things, yet you've done nothing." She expected rage at her insolence. Instead, Vano leaned forward, studying her with unsettling intensity. "What if I told you I've been investigating the council myself? That I've suspected corruption but lacked proof?" Aino's breath caught. "Then I would ask why you haven't shared your suspicions. Because the moment I move against the Beta Council without absolute proof, I risk civil war. Half the alphas in this kingdom are related to or allied with my advisors. I've been waiting for the right moment, the right evidence." His smile was sharp as a blade. "And then you appear, little Omega, breaking into my advisor's study with accusations of treason. The Blood Moon Festival provides you the perfect opportunity. During these 7 days, you can investigate any accusation without it being seen as a political purge. Pack law requires it. You've studied the laws carefully. I've had 18 years and nothing but time." Aino leaned forward. "Toivo isn't the only corrupt beta. Ilmari has been stealing pack funds. Helka has been selling Omega's children to neighboring packs. Half your council is rotten. But if you move during the Blood Moon Festival, if you frame it as responding to a formal petition for justice, the other alphas can't claim you're overreaching your authority." Vano was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. "And what do you want in return for this information? Because everyone wants something. Article 17, subsection 4. If I prove corruption, I may claim the seat of any wolf found guilty." The king laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. "You want a seat on my Beta Council? An Omega. Not just any seat. I want control of the council. I want the authority to reform how Omegas are treated in this pack. That's not revenge. That's revolution. Maybe they're the same thing." The king stood, moving to the window that overlooked the castle grounds. "You realize that if I agree to this, if I allow this petition to proceed, you'll have a target on your back. The betas will try to kill you before you can testify. They've been trying to kill my spirit for 18 years. Let them try for my body instead. At least then I can fight back." Vano turned to face her, and something in his expression had shifted. "I believe I underestimated you, Aino. Everyone does. It's my greatest advantage. Tell me." He moved closer, and Aino's wolf stirred again, responding to his proximity in ways she didn't understand. "What happened to make an Omega so fearless? What did they do to you?" Aino set down her wine glass, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "They killed my daughter." The words hung in the air like a death knell. 6 years ago I had a child. The father was a beta who raped me, but I loved her anyway. Her name was Tully. She was beautiful, perfect." Aino's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. Helka took her when she was 2 years old. Sold her to a pack in the West. I tried to find her, tried to fight, but I was just an Omega. Nobody cared. I received word 3 years ago that she died of fever in their Omega pens. The king's expression had turned to stone. And you've been planning this revenge since then. I've been planning justice. Revenge is personal. Justice is for everyone. Vano was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to his desk and pulled out fresh parchment. Tomorrow, you will formally present your petition before the full pack assembly. I'll have my personal guard protect you until the hearing. You'll provide all your evidence, and I'll convene an emergency council investigation. You're agreeing to this. I'm agreeing to uphold pack law, which requires me to hear your petition. His eyes met hers, and she saw something dangerous stirring there. But understand this, Aino. If your accusations prove false, if you've lied or exaggerated, I'll have you executed for sedition. The ancient laws won't save you from that. I'm not lying. Then tomorrow, we begin tearing down my kingdom to rebuild it. I hope you're ready for the consequences. Aino stood, her legs somehow steady despite everything. I've been ready for 18 years. As she turned to leave, the king's voice stopped her. One more thing. Your scent, it's not like other Omegas. It's unusual. Have you noticed Alphas reacting to you differently? Aino's hand froze on the door handle. She'd wondered about this herself, especially after the king's reaction when she'd served him wine. I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me now. I can tell when someone's being dishonest. She turned to face him. Fine. Since my daughter died, something changed. My wolf, which had always been weak and suppressed, started to emerge. My scent became stronger. Omegas aren't supposed to have this kind of presence, but I do. I don't know why. The king's expression was unreadable. Neither do I. But I intend to find out. The next morning, the great hall filled with every ranking member of the pack. Aino stood in the center of the room, dressed in her servant's gray, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. The whispers were cruel and constant. An Omega dares to petition the king. What delusions of grandeur. This is an insult to pack hierarchy. But Aino kept her eyes forward, fixed on King Vano, who sat on his throne with his beta council arrayed around him. The betas looked smug, certain this was merely a distraction they could easily dismiss. They had no idea what was coming. The king raised his hand, and silence fell. During the Blood Moon Festival, any wolf may petition for justice, regardless of rank. This is sacred law, established by the first Alphas. Omega Aino has invoked this right. We will hear her petition. Beta Toivo leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. My king, surely you don't intend to waste the pack's time with an Omega's complaints. They're emotional creatures, prone to exaggeration and fantasy. I intend to uphold pack law, Beta Toivo. Or do you suggest I violate the sacred traditions? The king's voice was silk over steel. Toivo fell silent, but his eyes promised murder. Vano gestured to Aino. Speak. Present your petition. Aino took a breath. This was it. Everything she'd planned, everything she'd sacrificed, came down to this moment. I petition for justice against the Beta Council for crimes of corruption, theft, abuse of authority, and treason against the crown. The hall erupted. Shouts of outrage. Calls for her immediate execution. Beta Ilmari leaped to his feet, his face purple with rage. This Omega dares to accuse us. She should be whipped for her insolence. The king's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Silence. She has the right to present evidence. Continue, Aino. Aino pulled out the documents she'd prepared, holding them high. Beta Toivo has been embezzling from the pack treasury for 7 years. I have records of bribes he's accepted, money he's diverted, taxes he's stolen. He's made himself rich while Omegas starve. These are lies. Toivo roared. Fabrications from a desperate servant. Then explain the ledgers in your private study. Explain the iron chest where you keep records of every illegal transaction. Explain the letter discussing plans to assassinate Prince Oti. The hall went deathly quiet. The king's voice was colder than winter frost. Is this true, Beta Toivo? Do you have such documents? I know, my king, I've never. Because I examined your study last night after this Omega brought her concerns to my attention. I read your documents myself. Every word she said is true. Toivo's face went from purple to white. Around him, the other betas shifted nervously, realizing the trap had already been sprung. Aino pressed her advantage. Beta Ilmari has been skimming pack funds and using them to buy property in the Southern Territories. Helka has sold over 30 Omega children to neighboring packs, pocketing the gold. Beta Sakari has been accepting bribes to fix pack judgments. Beta Lena has been. Enough. Ilmari drew his sword. I won't stand here and be accused by pack filth. He lunged toward Aino. She stood her ground, knowing this moment would come. But before Ilmari could reach her, the king moved with inhuman speed, intercepting the beta and slamming him to the floor. You dare draw a weapon in my hall? During a sacred petition. Venus Wolf was fully present now, his power filling the room like a storm. You've just confirmed your guilt. Ilmari struggled, but the king's hand was like iron on his throat. She's lying. They're all lies. Then you have nothing to fear from an investigation. The king straightened, addressing the assembly. I invoke the authority of the blood moon. For the next 4 days, there will be a formal investigation into these accusations. Any beta found guilty will be stripped of rank and punished according to pack law. Any beta who attempts to harm the petitioner will be considered guilty by default. He looked directly at Aino. And if the accusations prove true, the petitioner may claim the seats of the guilty, as is her right under Article 17. The implications rippled through the hall. An Omega on the Beta Council. It was unthinkable, revolutionary, impossible, but it was also legal. You can't do this. Beta Lena stood, her face twisted with fury. She's an Omega. The ancient laws never intended. The ancient laws say any wolf, without qualification by rank. Are you suggesting we abandon pack law whenever it's inconvenient? The king's smile was razor-sharp. Be careful, Beta Lena. You're beginning to sound like someone with something to hide. Aino watched the council members exchange panicked glances. But let them fear. Let them realize that their corruption had consequences. The king raised his voice. This assembly is dismissed. Investigation begins immediately. Beta Toivo, you will surrender your documents and yourself to my custody. The rest of the accused council will be confined to their quarters pending review of evidence. As the guards moved forward to take the betas into custody, Toivo turned his hatred on Aino. You'll die for this, Omega. I'll make sure of it. Even if I hang, you'll die screaming. Guards, the king's voice was bored, threatening a petitioner to his charges. Aino felt something unfurl in her chest. Not quite victory, not yet, but the first taste of justice. Around her, the pack members were in chaos, arguing, shocked, furious. But she stood quiet in the center of the storm, meeting the king's eyes across the hall. He nodded slightly, acknowledgement of one strategist to another. The game had truly begun. The investigation consumed the castle. King Vano had brought in auditors from neutral packs to examine the financial records, military officers loyal to him to secure evidence, and scribes to document every finding. Aino provided them with information she'd carefully gathered over years. Secret meeting locations, hidden ledgers, names of merchants who had paid bribes. The scope of the corruption was staggering. The betas hadn't just stolen money. They'd systematically dismantled every protection the Omega class had. They'd sold children, forced Omegas into unpaid labor, denied them medical care, and covered up dozens of deaths. Aino sat in the king's war room, another breach of protocol that had the remaining betas grinding their teeth, and compiled her evidence with methodical precision. She'd learned long ago to keep her emotions locked away when working. There would be time for tears later. Right now she needed to be sharp. "The Omega pens in the East Wing," she said to the scribe. "Beta Sakari has been overcrowding them, packing 30 wolves into spaces meant for 10. Last winter, 12 Omegas died of cold and disease." He reported them as transfers to other packs and kept their rations for himself. The scribe's hand shook as he wrote. Even the neutral pack members were horrified by what they were uncovering. King Vano entered the war room, his presence immediately commanding everyone's attention. "Aino." A word. She followed him to a private antechamber. The king looked tired. He'd been up for 2 days straight reviewing evidence, but his eyes were still sharp. "We've confirmed your accusations against all 6 betas. The evidence is overwhelming. They'll be tried tomorrow, and by tomorrow night, they'll either be executed or exiled. And my claim to their seats will be honored, if you still want it, because I need to make something clear to you." He moved closer, and again Aino felt that strange pull toward him, her wolf rising to meet his. "Taking those seats will make you the most powerful Omega in the kingdom's history. It will also make you a permanent target. Every traditionalist, every alpha who believes in the old hierarchies, will see you as an abomination. They'll try to kill you, undermine you, destroy you. Are you truly prepared for that? I've been prepared for that my entire life. The only difference is now I'll have the power to fight back." The king studied her for a long moment. "You're remarkable, you know that? I've led armies, conquered territories, united the clans through force. But you've accomplished something more impressive. You've weaponized the very laws they use to oppress you. Laws are only as powerful as those who enforce them. You're the Alpha King. Your enforcement makes all the difference." "True. But after tomorrow you'll be Beta Aino. Your enforcement will matter too." He hesitated, which seemed uncharacteristic for him. "There's something else. Your wolf, I felt it during the assembly. It's not Omega strength. It's something else entirely." Aino had felt it too. During the confrontation with the betas, when Ilmari had drawn his sword, her wolf had surged forward with a power she'd never experienced. For a moment she'd felt alpha strong. "I don't understand it either," she admitted. "Before my daughter died, my wolf was weak, barely present. But afterward it started changing, growing stronger. Grief can trigger latent abilities," the king said thoughtfully. "But this is more than that. Your scent, your presence, you're affecting the alphas in this castle. Several of them have approached me, asking who you are, why you smell like." He trailed off. "Like what?" His eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. "Like a potential mate." The words hung between them, electric and dangerous. "That's impossible," Aino said, but her voice was less certain than she wanted it to be. "Omegas don't have true mates. We're not supposed to." "Supposed to according to whom?" "The same betas who wrote rules to keep Omegas powerless." Vano moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "What if everything we've been told about Omega wolves is a lie? What if they suppressed your kind deliberately, because you were a threat?" "A threat to whom?" "To alphas like me. To the power structure. Think about it, Aino. If Omegas could be as powerful as alphas, if they could have true mates, if they could lead, the entire hierarchy collapses." Aino's mind reeled. Could it be true? Had generations of Omegas been deliberately weakened, suppressed, kept subservient not because they were naturally weak, but because they were too dangerous to be allowed freedom? "I need to research this," she said. "The old texts in the library. Already gathered them for you. They're in your new chambers." "My new chambers." The king's expression was carefully neutral. "You can't go back to the Omega quarters. Not after tomorrow. You'll need quarters appropriate to your new rank. I've had the West Tower prepared for you. It includes a study, private library, and enough security to stop any assassination attempts. You've thought of everything. I've learned to plan ahead. Usually I'm 10 steps in front of my enemies. His smile was wry. You managed to surprise me. That doesn't happen often. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the king's guards entered, bowing quickly. My king, there's been an incident. The Omega servant Karina has been attacked. Aino's blood ran cold. Where is she? Is she alive? Alive but injured. The healers are with her now. She claims it was Beta Toivo's son, seeking revenge for his father's arrest. Aino was moving before anyone could stop her, running through the corridors toward the healing rooms. The king kept pace beside her, his longer strides effortless. They found Karina on a healing bed, her face bruised, her arm in a sling. But she was conscious and alive. She smiled weakly when she saw Aino. I'm okay. Just a few bruises. You should see the other guy. You fought back. Aino grasped her friend's good hand. You think I was going to let him hurt me without a fight? I remembered what you always said. We're stronger than they tell us we are. Karina's smile faded. But Aino, he wasn't just trying to hurt me. He wanted information. He wanted to know where you sleep, what your routine is. They're planning something. The king's voice was deadly quiet. Did you tell him anything? I told him to go to hell. Karina's grin was fierce despite her injuries. An Omega's curse is supposed to be bad luck, right? I gave him plenty. Vaino turned to his guard. Find Beta Toivo's son. Bring him to me in chains. And increase security around all Omega servants. If anyone else is harmed, I'll hold their immediate superior responsible. After the guard left, the king looked at Aino. This is escalating faster than I anticipated. They're desperate, which makes them dangerous. You need to stay in the protected quarters from now on. I won't hide. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to be strategic. You're no good to the Omega's dead. Aino wanted to argue, but she could see the logic. And more than that, she could see the concern in his eyes. The Alpha King was worried about her. Fine. But Karina comes with me. And any other Omega who wants protection. Agreed. I'll have the West Tower expanded. It can house 20 comfortably. Over the next hours, word spread through the Omega servants about the safe quarters. Many were too afraid to accept, conditioned by years of believing they didn't deserve safety. But 12 of them, including Karina, agreed to move to the West Tower. As Aino helped settle them in, rooms with real beds, warm blankets, windows that let in sunlight, she saw the disbelief on their faces. Most had never had private space before. Some cried. Is this real? Asked Sonny, a young Omega who'd been born in the castle. Or will they take it away tomorrow? It's real, Aino promised. And after tomorrow it gets even better. After tomorrow, things change permanently. That night, unable to sleep, Aino made her way to the study the king had prepared for her. The ancient texts were there as promised. She lit candles and began to read, searching for any mention of Omega wolves and their true nature. Hours passed. Most texts simply referred to Omegas as the servant class, necessary but inferior. But then she found something. A fragment of a text from before the Great Clan Wars, before the current pack hierarchies were established. The Omega carries the balance. Neither Alpha nor Beta but the bridge between. In ancient times, the Omega could rise to become Alpha if their strength proved true. The goddess granted them the gift of evolution, that the pack might never grow stagnant. Aino read the passage 3 times. Evolution. The ability to become Alpha. Her hands trembled as she turned the page. The next section had been carefully torn out. Destroyed, she realized, deliberately. Someone hadn't wanted this information preserved. But there was a footnote, barely legible. See also, The Rising Wolf Prophecy, Volume 12. She searched the shelves frantically. No Volume 12. Had it been destroyed? Hidden? You won't find it. I removed it. Aino spun to find King Vaino standing in the doorway of her study. He held a leather-bound book. You knew about this. Her voice was sharp with accusation. You knew omegas could evolve, and you said nothing? I suspected. I didn't know for certain until I read my father's private journals after he died. He discovered the truth late in his reign, but by then the system was too entrenched. He feared civil war if he tried to change it. The king moved into the room, setting the book on her desk. I've been trying to figure out how to dismantle the hierarchy without destroying the kingdom. And then you appeared, already halfway through the evolution. What do you mean, halfway? Your wolf is stronger than Omega, not yet Alpha. You're transitioning. The stress, the grief, the rage. It triggered something dormant in your bloodline. He opened the book to a marked page. According to this, true Omegas are rare. Most wolves designated as Omega are just weaker betas, suppressed by Alpha dominance. But true Omegas have the potential to become the most powerful Alphas of all, because they understand both weakness and strength. Aino stared at the text, her mind reeling. How long have you known about me specifically? Since the first night. Your scent. I recognized it from descriptions in these texts. A rising wolf. An Omega in transition. His eyes met hers, intense and searching. And according to the prophecy, a rising wolf can only complete their evolution with the help of their true mate. The air between them crackled with tension. You think you're my mate? Aino's voice was barely a whisper. I think the bond between us is undeniable. I think my wolf has been calling to yours since the moment you served me wine. I think. He took a breath, and for the first time she saw the Alpha King look uncertain. I think I've been waiting for you without knowing it. This is insane. You're the Alpha King. I'm an Omega. We're not. This isn't. Isn't it? Tell me you don't feel it. Tell me your wolf doesn't rise when I'm near. Tell me you don't sense the connection. Aino wanted to deny it. Wanted to say it was impossible, that she was imagining things, that this was just another form of manipulation. But she couldn't lie, not about this. I feel it, she admitted. But feeling something doesn't make it right. You hold absolute power over me. How can I trust that this bond is real and not just another way to control me? Aino moved closer but stopped just out of reach. You can't. Not yet. Trust has to be earned. So I'm going to propose something. He pulled a small knife from his belt and drew it across his palm, blood welling immediately. A blood oath. I swear on my wolf, on my crown, on my life. I will never use my power to force you into anything. Not a bond, not a relationship, not even remaining in this castle. Your choices are your own. And if you choose to reject the mate bond, I will honor that choice, even if it kills me. Blood oaths are binding. If you break it, I'll die. No. That's the point. He held out his bleeding palm. Do you accept my oath? Aino stared at his hand. This was real. The Alpha King was offering her something no Omega had ever been given. Genuine autonomy, backed by the most serious vow a wolf could make. Slowly, she picked up the knife and drew it across her own palm. She pressed her bleeding hand to his, their blood mingling. Power surged between them, the oath taking hold, binding him to his word with magic older than the kingdom itself. I accept your oath, she said formally. And I offer my own in return. I will be honest with you about my feelings, my intentions, and my choices. I will not manipulate or deceive you. And I will give the mate bond genuine consideration, without prejudice, when the time is right. The magic sealed both oaths. When they released hands, their palms had already healed, leaving only thin white scars. Tomorrow changes everything, Aino said quietly. After the trial, you'll be Beta Aino, the first Omega to hold council rank in recorded history. Every eye will be on you. Let them look. I'm ready. I know you are. His smile was warm, genuine. That's what terrifies them. The great hall had been transformed into a formal court. Every ranking member of the pack was required to attend, along with witnesses from neutral packs to ensure fairness. The 6 accused betas sat in chains before the throne, their faces ranging from defiant to terrified. Aino stood to the side as the petitioner, dressed now not in servant grey but in formal attire the king had provided, deep blue that marked her as under royal protection. Her hair was clean and properly styled for the first time in years. She looked, Karina had said with tears in her eyes, like someone who mattered. King Vaino sat on his throne, the picture of cold authority. We are gathered for the trial of 6 betas accused of corruption, theft, abuse of authority and treason. The evidence has been reviewed by neutral parties. We will now hear their findings. An elder from a northern pack stood, unrolling a scroll. After thorough investigation, we find the accusations to be substantiated and proven. Beta Toivo embezzled over 50,000 gold pieces and plotted to assassinate Prince Ati. Beta Ilmari stole pack funds totaling 30,000 gold. Beta Sakari accepted bribes and caused the deaths of 12 Omegas through negligence. Beta Lena sold 14 Omega children for personal profit. Beta Helka sold 32 Omega children and falsified records to cover the crimes. Beta Jocko facilitated these crimes and took payment to look the other way. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. 50,000 gold pieces was enough to feed the entire Omega class for a decade. The scope of the theft was staggering. The elder continued. Under pack law, these crimes carry the penalty of either execution or permanent exile, at the Alpha King's discretion. Additionally, the petitioner has the right to claim the seats and authority of the convicted. All eyes turned to Aino. This was the moment, the point of no return. Beta Toivo spat toward her, his chains rattling. You think you've won, Omega filth? You think they'll accept you? You'll be dead within a month, and everything will go back to the way it should be. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. Aino stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. You're wrong. I'm the future. And you're the past. She turned to address the assembly. For generations, Omegas have been treated as less than wolves. We've been beaten, starved, sold and killed, all while the betas who were supposed to protect us grew fat on stolen wealth. But that ends today. I claim the seats of all 6 convicted betas. I claim their authority, their positions, and their responsibility to serve this pack with integrity. An Omega cannot hold beta rank. Someone shouted from the crowd. It violates the natural order. King Vaino rose, his voice cutting through the protests. The natural order, or the convenient order. Pack law is clear. Any wolf may hold any position they're qualified for. Aino has proven herself more than qualified. She discovered corruption my own investigations missed. She had the courage to bring it to light knowing it might cost her life. She has studied our laws more thoroughly than most of you ever have. If anyone here believes themselves more qualified, step forward and challenge her claim. Silence. No one moved. I thought not. The king's gaze swept the assembly. Beta Aino will join my council, along with 5 other wolves I've selected to replace the traitors. And her first task will be to reform Omega protections and create a path for other Omegas to rise based on merit rather than birth rank. This is revolution. An alpha from the Western Territory stood, his face red with fury. You're overturning centuries of tradition. No, Aino said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I'm restoring it. The ancient laws, the original pack structure, allowed for merit-based advancement. It was later betas who corrupted the system to maintain their power. I'm not creating something new. I'm reclaiming something that was stolen from us. The king nodded. Well said, Beta Aino. Now, as for sentencing. He turned his cold gaze to the 6 chained betas. You stole from this pack. You murdered children. You betrayed your oaths and plotted against the crown. Execution would be merciful. Exile would be lenient. So I choose neither. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. You will be stripped of your wolf, the king continued, his voice like iron, made human. And then you will work in the Omega pens you created, living under the same conditions you forced on others, for the rest of your natural lives. You wanted to treat Omegas as less than wolves. Now you'll experience what that truly means. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. To strip a wolf of their inner beast was considered a fate worse than death, a form of execution that left the victim alive to suffer. The 6 betas began to scream, begging for mercy, for death, for anything but that. The king showed no emotion. Take them away. The ritual will be performed tonight. And let this be a message to anyone else who thinks to abuse the powerless. I am watching. The law is watching. And justice will be absolute. As the guards dragged the screaming betas from the hall, Aino felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that they were being punished. Horror at the severity of the sentence. And underneath it all, a deep, bone-deep exhaustion from carrying the weight of this fight for so long. The king addressed the assembly one final time. This concludes the trial. The Blood Moon Festival continues for 2 more days. Anyone with grievances or petitions may present them according to sacred law. That is all. The crowd began to disperse, many casting dark looks at Aino. She'd won, but she'd also made enemies of everyone who benefited from the old system. Still, some faces showed different emotions. Hope, wonder, cautious approval. Other omegas, and even some lower-ranked betas, looking at her like she'd lit a fire in the darkness. Karina rushed forward, embracing her tightly. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Aino corrected. Every omega who survived, who kept their dignity when they tried to strip it away, who refused to give up, we all did this. More omegas began to gather, hesitant at first, then more confident. They touched her hands, her arms, tears streaming down their faces. Aino embraced each one, feeling their hope like a living thing. This was why she'd fought. Not for revenge, though revenge was sweet. But for this, the possibility that things could be different. That the next generation wouldn't have to suffer as they had. A beta she didn't recognize approached. Younger, uncertain. Beta Aino. Mvaiko. I served under Beta Ilmari. But I never agreed with his methods. Hey, I want to help. With the reforms. If you'll have me. Aino studied him carefully. Her instincts searching for deception. But she found only sincerity. Report to the West Tower tomorrow morning. We have a lot of work to do. As the Omegas and sympathetic pack members gathered around her, Aino caught the king's eye across the hall. He watched her with an expression she was beginning to recognize. Pride mixed with something deeper. The mate bond, still unacknowledged but undeniable, hummed between them like a taut string. Later that evening, in her new study in the West Tower, Aino held the first meeting of her reform committee. 12 omegas, 3 sympathetic betas, and 2 scholars from neutral packs who specialized in ancient pack law. We have 2 days left in the Blood Moon Festival, Aino began, spreading maps and documents across the table. After that, it becomes much harder to implement changes. So we need to move fast. I want proposals for Omega education, healthcare access, legal protections against abuse, and pathways to advancement. Nothing is off limits. Everything is on the table. They worked through the night, fueled by hope and decades of suppressed ideas. The Omegas, it turned out, had been thinking about reforms for years. They just never had anyone in power willing to listen. Mandatory education for all Omega children, Sonny suggested. Reading, writing, mathematics. Make it illegal to deny them schooling. Healthcare access equal to betas, Karina added. Omega mothers die in childbirth at 3 times the rate of beta mothers because they're denied proper care. That has to stop. Legal representation, said an older Omega named Marty. When Omegas are accused of crimes, they should have someone to speak for them who understands the law. Aino wrote everything down. Her hand cramping but her spirit soaring. Keep going. What else? By dawn, they had drafted a comprehensive reform document. It was ambitious, revolutionary, and absolutely necessary. Aino read through it one final time, making minor edits. This is good, she said. This is really good. I'll present it to the king this morning. She found Vano in his war room, looking even more exhausted than she felt. He'd been up all night as well, overseeing the ritual that stripped the corrupt betas of their wolves. It was a brutal magic, and it had taken its toll even on him. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "They're human now. Conscious, aware of what they've lost, and already beginning to understand the hell they created for others." He looked at her, and she saw the weight of leadership in his eyes. "I don't regret it, but I'm not proud of it either. Leadership rarely allows for pride. Only necessity." Wise words from the kingdom's newest beta. He gestured to the chair across from him. "You have something for me. I can tell by your expression." Aino handed him the reform document. A comprehensive plan to reform Omega rights and protections. It uses the authority of the Blood Moon Festival to establish these changes as sacred law, making them almost impossible to overturn. The king read through the document carefully. Minutes passed. Aino waited, her heart pounding. This was the real test. Would he support genuine change, or had he only gone along with her plan to root out corruption? Finally Vaino looked up. "This is brilliant. It's everything I wanted to implement but didn't have the political capital to attempt." He picked up his pen and signed the bottom of the document with a flourish. "Ratified by royal decree. These reforms are now pack law." Aino felt tears prickling her eyes for the first time in years. "Just like that. Just like that. You did the hard work. I'm just adding my signature." He stood moving around the desk. "But Aino, you understand that this makes you even more of a target. There are alphas who will see this as an existential threat. Let them. I'm not backing down. I know you're not. That's what worries me." His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently cupped her cheek. The touch sent electricity through her. "The mate bond is getting stronger. Can you feel it?" Yes. There was no point in denying it. Every moment they spent together, the connection deepened. Her wolf called to his constantly now. The texts said the bond would push us toward completion of the mating. Toward consummation. The texts also said we can resist it if we choose. The bond serves the wolves, not the other way around. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I meant what I swore. Choice. Always." Aino leaned into his touch despite herself. "What if I don't know what I want? What if part of me wants this, and part of me is terrified that it's just another form of control? Then we wait. Until you're certain. Until you trust me and trust yourself." He pulled back, though she could see it cost him. "You have 2 days left to prove yourself to the pack. Focus on that. Everything else can wait." The West Tower had become command central for the Omega Revolution. Wolves came and went constantly, bringing news of how the reforms were being received throughout the kingdom. The responses were mixed. Omegas were celebrating, many betas were supportive, but a significant faction of traditional alphas were furious. Aino knew a confrontation was coming. She just didn't know what form it would take. The answer came at midday, when an alpha from the Eastern Territories formally challenged her right to hold a beta seat. His name was Vainamoinen, and he was everything Aino expected. Huge, scarred, radiating power and arrogance. He'd brought 50 warriors with him, all of them loyal to the old ways. "I invoke the right of challenge," Vainamoinen declared in the Great Hall, his voice booming. "This Omega has no business on the Beta Council. I challenge her for the seat. Let combat decide who's worthy." The hall erupted in shouts, some of support, others of protest. Aino stood calmly, though her mind was racing. Combat trial by combat was legal under pack law, though it was rarely invoked for council seats. King Vainoa's face could have been carved from stone. Beta Aino earned her seat through legal petition during the Blood Moon Festival. "Your challenge is inappropriate. With respect, my king, pack law allows challenges to any new council appointment within 7 days of their installation. She's held the seat for less than 2 days. My challenge is legal." Vainamoinen smiled cruelly. "Unless the Omega is afraid to face a real wolf." Aino stepped forward. I accept your challenge. No. The king's voice cracked like a whip, but Aino shook her head. Pack law is pack law. If I refuse, my seat is forfeit anyway. At least this way, I have a chance. She met Wainamoinen's eyes. What are the terms? Combat in wolf form. First to submit or die loses their claim. I propose an amendment. Combat in human form with ceremonial weapons. First blood rather than death or submission. The victor claims the seat. The loser leaves the territory without retribution. Wainamoinen laughed. Afraid to face me as a wolf? Your omega beast would break before mine even got started. Then accept my terms and prove your superiority. The alpha's eyes narrowed. He'd expected her to be terrified, to refuse, or to fail immediately in wolf combat. By proposing human form combat, she'd created uncertainty. Was she a skilled fighter? Did she have tricks he didn't know about? Accepted, he finally said. Tomorrow morning, in the training grounds, may the strongest wolf win. As Wainamoinen and his warriors departed, Aino felt the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. She was competent with basic self-defense. Years of avoiding attacks had taught her that. But she was no warrior. Wainamoinen was a veteran of dozens of battles. The king cornered her the moment they were alone. Have you lost your mind? He'll kill you. He'd kill me faster in wolf form. In human form I have a chance. What chance? You're half his size. I'm smarter, faster, and I've survived things he can't imagine. She met his furious gaze. You have to let me do this, Vaino. If I refuse the challenge, I lose all credibility. The pack will see me as weak, using royal protection to avoid proving myself. But if I fight and win, no one will dare question my right to the seat again. And if you fight and lose, you're dead. His power filled the room. His wolf very close to the surface. The mate bond, I won't survive losing you. The oath, the bond, my wolf, it'll destroy me. Aino felt her own wolf rise to meet his. No longer Omega weak but something new and powerful. Then help me train. We have 16 hours. Teach me how to beat him. For a long moment, she thought he would refuse, would forbid her to fight. But then something shifted in his expression. Acceptance, respect, and determination. All right. If you're going to do this, we do it right. Follow me. The king took her to the private training grounds, a walled arena where he drilled with his personal guard. He selected 2 practice swords, balanced and weighted for serious training. Show me what you know. Aino demonstrated the basic defensive moves she'd learned over years of necessity. The king watched in silence, his tactical mind clearly assessing her abilities. You're not completely untrained. That's good. But you fight like someone who's only ever tried to survive, not someone who fights to win. We need to change your mindset. For the next hours, he drilled her relentlessly. Not on complex techniques, there wasn't time, but on the basics done perfectly. How to use an opponent's strength against them. How to create openings. How to read body language and anticipate attacks. Wainamoinen is arrogant, the king explained between drills. He expects an easy victory. Use that. Let him get overconfident. Let him think he's winning. Then strike when he's vulnerable. They practiced until Aino's arms shook with exhaustion. Then they practiced more. By evening, she was moving on instinct, her body internalizing the techniques through pure repetition. Enough, Vaino finally said. You need rest more than practice now. Aino lowered her practice sword, sweat dripping down her face. Every muscle screamed. But she felt more prepared than she had any right to be. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing I could do this. I've believed you could do anything since the moment you broke into my advisor's study and looked me in the eye without fear. He took her practice sword, his fingers brushing hers. But Aino, I need you to promise me something. What? If it goes wrong tomorrow, if you're about to lose, submit. Don't let pride or principles get you killed. Submit, and I'll deal with the political fallout. I can't promise that. Then I'm withdrawing my permission for the fight. You don't have the authority to do that. Pack law says. Damn pack law. His control finally cracked. You think I care about laws or traditions when your life is at stake? You think I can just stand there and watch you die? You have to. Because if you interfere, you'll undermine everything I've built. The Omegas who are watching this fight see it as proof that they can rise, that they can fight for themselves. If the Alpha King has to save me, it confirms what everyone already believes, that Omegas are weak and need Alpha protection. I don't care what it confirms. I care about you surviving. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Aino felt the mate bond surging, pulling her toward him with almost irresistible force. She took a step closer, then another. I care about you too, she whispered. More than I thought possible. And that's exactly why I have to do this myself. Because caring about someone doesn't mean letting them fight your battles. It means believing they're strong enough to fight their own. Vaino pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. She felt his heart racing, felt his wolf calling to hers. The bond between them was almost complete now, waiting only for them to accept it fully. Promise me you'll survive, he said into her hair. Not submit. Just survive. Whatever it takes. I promise. They stood there for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. Then Aino pulled back, knowing she needed to rest. I should go. Dawn comes early. Sleep in my chambers tonight. She raised an eyebrow. Is that appropriate? Probably not. But I don't care. I need to know you're safe for one more night. You can take the bed. I'll take the floor. Aino should have refused. Should have maintained propriety. Instead she nodded. All right. They walked to his chambers in comfortable silence. True to his word, Vaino gave her the bed while he settled on the floor with a pillow and blanket. But neither of them slept much. Aino was too aware of his presence, of the bond humming between them. Finally, in the hours before dawn, she spoke into the darkness. If I win tomorrow, when I win tomorrow, I want to explore the mate bond. Properly. Not rushed, not forced, but intentionally. She heard him shift in the darkness. You're certain. About exploring it. About where it will lead. Well. But I think I want to find out. Then win tomorrow, Beta Aino. And we'll see where this bond takes us. Dawn broke cold and clear over the training grounds. The entire pack had gathered to watch the challenge. Hundreds of wolves, filling the arena and the walls around it. Aino could feel their anticipation, their judgment, their curiosity. She stood in the center of the arena wearing simple fighting leathers the king had provided. Across from her, Vainamoinen looked massive and confident. His ceremonial sword held casually in one hand. Last chance to submit, little Omega, he called out. Save yourself the humiliation of defeat. Aino picked up her own sword, testing its weight. The king had chosen it specifically for her, lighter than standard, balanced for speed over power. I don't plan on being defeated. King Vaino stood at the edge of the arena to oversee the challenge, as was his duty. His face was carefully neutral, but Aino could feel his tension through the mate bond. She sent him a thought, not sure if he would receive it. I've got this. A warmth in her chest suggested he'd heard. The judge, an elder from a neutral pack, raised his hand. This is a formal challenge under pack law. Combat will continue until first blood is drawn. At that point, the victor claims Beta Aino's council seat. The loser must leave the territory. Are both parties ready? Ready, Vainamoinen said confidently. Ready, Aino echoed. Begin. Vainamoinen attacked immediately. His sword sweeping in a powerful arc that would have split Aino in half if it had connected. She dove aside, rolling and coming up in a defensive stance. The crowd murmured. They'd expected her to try to parry his strength, a mistake that would have shattered her defense immediately. Instead, she was using the king's primary lesson. Don't meet force with force. Evade and counter. Wainamoinen pressed his attack, a series of heavy strikes that drove her backward across the arena. To the watching crowd, it looked like she was losing, being overwhelmed. But Aino was counting his movements, learning his patterns. The king had been right. Wainamoinen was arrogant. Each strike was powerful but predictable. "Is running all you can do?" the alpha taunted, his sword whistling through the air. "Stand and fight." Aino didn't respond. She saved her breath for movement, for survival. Her arms were already aching from deflecting his attacks, even at angles. She couldn't keep this up much longer. She had to end this soon. Wainamoinen lunged forward with an overhead strike, committing fully to the attack. This was it, the opening she'd been waiting for. Instead of retreating, Aino stepped into his attack, inside his guard where his long sword couldn't reach her effectively. Her blade flashed upward, aiming for his sword arm. The alpha twisted at the last second, her blade scoring across his shoulder instead of his arm. First blood. But not enough, the wound was too shallow. The judge wouldn't call it. Worse, she'd gotten too close. Wainamoinen dropped his sword and grabbed her with his bare hands, his massive strength overwhelming. He lifted her off her feet and threw her across the arena. Aino hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Her sword skittered away. The crowd roared, some in triumph, others in dismay. "Stay down!" Wainamoinen picked up his sword and stalked toward her. "I'll make this quick. A clean death for a brave fool." Aino's vision swam, but through the bond she felt Vaino's presence, steady and strong. He believed in her. She couldn't let him down. Couldn't let the Omegas watching this fail. More than that, she couldn't let herself down. Her wolf surged inside her, no longer weak, no longer suppressed. The evolution the king had spoken of crystallized in that moment. She wasn't Omega anymore. She was something new, something powerful. As Wainamoinen raised his sword for the killing blow, Aino rolled to her feet with inhuman speed, snatching up her fallen blade. But instead of attacking, she did something no one expected. She laughed. "What's funny?" Wainamoinen hesitated, confused. "You," Aino said, her voice carrying across the silent arena. "You came here thinking you'd crush a weak Omega. But I'm not weak. I never was. You just told yourself I was because it made you feel superior. Enough talk. You're afraid," she continued, circling now, her movements fluid and confident. "Afraid that if an Omega can hold a beta seat, your own position becomes questionable. Afraid that strength might not be about muscles and violence. Afraid that you're not as special as you thought." Wainamoinen's face flushed with rage. "I'll show you afraid." He charged, abandoning technique in favor of pure aggression. Exactly what Aino had been pushing him toward. She waited until the last possible second, then used a move the king had drilled into her repeatedly. She dropped low, blade angled upward, and let his own momentum carry him onto her sword. The blade sliced across his thigh, deep and unmistakable. Blood poured from the wound. "First blood," the judge called immediately. "The challenge goes to Beta Aino." Silence fell over the arena. Then slowly the Omegas began to cheer. The sound built, joined by sympathetic betas and even some alphas who respected skill over brute strength. Within moments, the arena shook with the sound of celebration. Aino stood over the bleeding Wainamoinen, her sword point lowered but ready. "Leave," she said quietly. "Leave this territory and don't come back. Find somewhere else to cling to your outdated ideas about strength and worth." The alpha struggled to his feet, his face twisted with humiliation. But he nodded curtly and limped from the arena, his warriors following in shame-faced silence. The moment they were gone, Aino's legs gave out. The adrenaline crash hit her all at once, and she would have fallen if strong arms hadn't caught her. "I've got you." Vaino's voice was rough with emotion. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. To the crowd he called out, "Beta Aino has defended her seat and her honor. Let no one question her right to serve on this council." The cheering redoubled. As the king carried her from the arena, Aino saw faces in the crowd. Omega children looking at her with wonder, young Omegas with tears streaming down their faces, even some betas nodding with respect. She'd done it. Not just won the fight but proven something essential, that Omegas could be strong, could fight, could win. "You promised you'd survive," Vano said as he carried her back to the castle. "You didn't mention almost dying in the process." "I didn't almost die. I had it under control." "Your definition of control is terrifying." Despite her exhaustion, Aino laughed. "Says the man who strips corrupt betas of their wolves as punishment." "Fair point." He looked down at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "You were magnificent. Terrifying and reckless and absolutely magnificent." They reached his chambers, and he set her gently on the bed. A healer arrived moments later, fussing over Aino's bruises and checking for serious injury. But nothing was broken, nothing permanently damaged. After the healer left, Vano sat beside her on the bed. "Tomorrow is the last day of the Blood Moon Festival. After that, the sacred period ends, and things return to normal. Or as normal as they can be with you on my council." "Things will never be normal again," Aino said. "We've started something that can't be stopped. More Omegas will petition for positions. The reforms will spread beyond this pack. Everything is changing." "I know." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the scar on her palm from their blood oath. "And I find myself grateful for it. You've made me a better king, Aino. You've made this entire kingdom better. We're not done yet. We've won battles, but the war for real equality will take years. Then it's fortunate we have years ahead of us." He hesitated. "You said last night you wanted to explore the mate bond. Did you mean it?" Aino's heart raced. "Yes. But Vano, I need you to understand. I'm not ready to complete the bond. Not yet. I need time to adjust to everything that's changed. I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own before I bind myself to anyone, even you." "I understand. We'll take it as slowly as you need." He leaned in, his lips barely brushing her forehead. "But I'm not going anywhere. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." The mate bond hummed between them, warm and patient. For the first time in her life, Aino felt genuinely safe. Not because someone was protecting her, but because she'd proven she could protect herself. 3 months later, Beta Aino stood in the remodeled council chambers, surrounded by the most diverse beta council in the kingdom's history. 5 Omegas, including herself. 4 betas committed to reform. 2 alphas who had proven their integrity through years of service. The changes they'd implemented were already bearing fruit. Omega education programs had enrolled over 300 students. Healthcare access had dropped Omega mortality rates by 40%. Legal protections had prevented dozens of abuses that would have gone unchallenged under the old system. But more importantly, the culture was shifting. Omegas walked with their heads held high now. They spoke up in pack meetings. 3 had challenged 4 and 1 minor positions throughout the kingdom. The revolution Aino had started was spreading. "The Western territories are requesting copies of our reform documents," Vico reported. He'd proven himself invaluable. His knowledge of pack politics helping navigate resistance from traditional alphas. Alpha Terry wants to implement similar changes in her territory. "Send them everything," Aino decided. Knowledge should be freely shared. After the council session ended, she made her way to the West Tower, which had become much more than just safe quarters. It was now the Omega Development Center, housing education programs, legal aid offices, and counseling services. The Omegas who worked there were paid fair wages, treated with respect, and given opportunities to advance. Karina met her at the entrance, beaming. "You have to see the new literacy class. 20 students, Aino. 20 Omegas learning to read." They walked through the building together, and Aino felt pride swelling in her chest. All of this had started as revenge, but it had become something so much more important. Purpose, legacy, hope. That evening, she joined King Vano for dinner, as had become their custom. They ate together most nights now, discussing kingdom business, arguing about policy, sharing the day's victories and frustrations. The mate bond had strengthened over the months, and while they hadn't completed it, the connection between them was undeniable. "I had an interesting conversation with Prince Otti today," Vano said over wine. "He's returning from the north next week, and he asked specifically about you. Should I be worried? On the contrary, he wants to implement similar Omega reforms in the military. Apparently, several Omega soldiers have approached him about advancement opportunities." Aino smiled. "The old guard must be having fits." "They are. But Otti doesn't care, and neither do I. Change is coming whether they like it or not." After dinner, they walked through the castle gardens, enjoying the cool evening air. The blood moon had come and gone 3 times since Aino's challenge, and each cycle had brought new petitions, new reforms, new changes. "Do you remember what you said on that first night?" Vano asked. "When I found you in Toivo's study, I said a lot of things that night. You said you were seeking justice, and I asked why you'd risk everything." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You've achieved more than justice, Aino. You've created a revolution. You've changed the fundamental structure of our society. And you've done it all in less than a year." "We've done it," she corrected. "I couldn't have accomplished any of this without your support. I supported you because you were right. Because you had the courage to challenge a corrupt system, and the intelligence to dismantle it legally." He took her hands. "The mate bond has been patient, but my wolf is getting insistent. I need to know, is there a future for us? Or should I accept that you'll never be ready?" Aino looked up at him, this powerful king who had given her the tools to claim her own power rather than making her dependent on his. Who had supported her reforms even when they challenged his authority. Who had kept every promise, honored every oath, and never once tried to control her. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "Not because I need you but because I want you. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm strong enough to choose partnership without losing myself." The relief and joy on his face were almost overwhelming. "You're certain?" "I'm certain. I love you, Vano. Not as Omega to Alpha, but as equal to equal. As partner to partner." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Aino felt the mate bond snap into place completely. It didn't diminish her or control her. Instead, it amplified her strength, doubled her resolve, and filled the empty spaces in her heart she hadn't even known existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Vano rested his forehead against hers. "My queen," he whispered. "I'm not queen. I'm Beta Aino. You're both. You took my castle and turned it into your throne room, just like you promised. You rule this kingdom as surely as I do, whether you wear a crown or not." Aino thought about that first night, scrubbing floors while they mocked her. Thought about the journey from there to here, from powerless Omega to Beta Council member, from voiceless servant to architect of revolution, from broken survivor to beloved mate of the Alpha King. 7 days, she said with a smile. That's all it took to change everything. 7 days to start the revolution. A lifetime to see it through. He kissed her again. Are you ready for that? Years of fighting, of resistance, of slowly transforming this kingdom into what it should be. I've been ready since I was 5 years old and first realized that being called Omega meant being called worthless. She squeezed his hands. But now I'm not fighting alone. Now I have allies, supporters, and you. They walked back to the castle together, their wolves content, their bond complete, their future stretching ahead full of challenges and possibilities. In the Omega quarters, no longer cramped and degrading, but comfortable and dignified, young wolves dreamed of advancement and education. In council chambers throughout the kingdom, conversations were changing, laws were being rewritten, opportunities were opening. And in the great hall where Aino had once scrubbed floors on her knees, her name was now carved into the council wall alongside the kingdom's most respected leaders. Beta Aino, architect of reform, champion of justice, the Omega who rose. She had promised herself revenge. But she had achieved something far more powerful. She had transformed an entire society, proven that strength came in many forms, and paved the way for thousands of Omegas who would never have to suffer as she had. The castle that had once been her prison was now her throne room. The king who could have been her oppressor was now her partner. The life that had been stolen from her had been reclaimed and rebuilt into something magnificent. And as the moon rose over the kingdom, casting silver light across stone walls and hopeful faces, Aino stood at the window of her tower and smiled. The revolution was just beginning. The old powers were crumbling. The future was being born. And she, the Omega they had tried to break, the servant they had dismissed, the mother whose grief had forged her into something unbreakable, she was exactly where she belonged. On a throne she had built with her own hands, ruling a kingdom she had transformed through courage and conviction. The Omega's revenge was complete. But the Omega's reign had only just begun. And that is the story of how Aino transformed from the lowest Omega to the most powerful force in the kingdom in just 7 days. 7 days to dismantle corruption. 7 days to claim her throne. 7 days to prove that the strongest wolf isn't always the one with the loudest roar, but the one with the courage to challenge injustice when everyone says you should stay silent. Aino's story reminds us that we all have power we haven't tapped into yet. We all have the ability to challenge systems that are broken, to stand up for what's right even when it's terrifying, and to transform our circumstances through strategic action and unwavering determination. If this story resonated with you, if Aino's journey from servant to sovereign inspired something in you, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug. Drop it in the comments below. Whether you're in Tokyo or Toronto, Lagos or London, Paris or Port Harcourt, let me know you're out there. Let me know this story touched you. And if you believe in the power of transformation, if you believe that anyone can rise regardless of where they started, share this story. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Share it with someone who's been told they're not enough. Share it with someone who's ready to turn their pain into power. Because that's what Aino did. She took 18 years of suffering and turned it into 7 days of revolution. She took every insult, every humiliation, every moment they tried to break her, and she used it as fuel to burn down their corrupt system and build something better in its place. You have that same power. Maybe you're not overthrowing a kingdom, but you're fighting your own battles, challenging your own corrupt systems, building your own throne. And I want you to know you can do it. If an Omega who spent 18 years scrubbing floors can become the most influential beta in the kingdom, you can achieve whatever goal you're working toward. So tell me, what's your castle? What's the system you're ready to challenge? What's the throne you're building for yourself? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I'll be cheering you on. And if you want more stories like this, stories about underdogs who refuse to stay down, about strategic revenge that transforms into justice, about characters who use their minds as weapons when physical power fails them, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Because I've got more stories coming that will make you think, make you feel, and maybe, just maybe, inspire you to start your own revolution. Remember, they called her worthless. She proved them wrong. They said she would never rise. She made herself a throne. They tried to break her. She broke their entire system instead. What will they say about you?